What's up guys, Brooke from GiveWave Studios. Today I'm going to show you how to turn all of this into this. Super cute little lantern inspired from Tears of the Kingdom. This has a nice effect where it looks like stained glass. So I'm going to show you guys how to get this stained glass finish as well as this painted look. Alright, to get started we're going to focus on the skeleton frame. You are going to be receiving it in your DIY kit with not all of the supports taken out. Alright, so that's most of our supports off, but if you see in between these frames, there's still a little bit of that 3D printing gunk on the frames. So I'm gonna go in and clean those up with an X-Acto knife. And after cleaning up the big gunks, I'm gonna go back in with sandpaper and sand out those areas to make it smooth. Alright, so once you have those excess areas trimmed up, you're just going to go in with your sandpaper. Alright, so I have the top area sanded down, and you can see that I also sanded underneath to get those inside pieces smooth as well, because those are also going to be visible once we put the panels in. So here we are. You can see I've sanded down on the tops and the bottoms of this area. What you want to focus on is just like getting these ridges down to near smoothness. It's okay if it's not perfectly smooth because in the next step we're going to be filling these in. Alright, so when we're here we're going to use this 2-in-1 filler and sandable to go over our sanded frame to get an overall more smooth finish, and we're going to sand it again after we're done with that. Alright, so while our paint is drying, we're going to move on to the next step, which is setting up our vinyl for our panels on the side of our lantern. So the vinyl that you receive is going to look something like this. First thing that I'm going to do is sort this into color sections. Alright, so now I have just my orange and I'm going to grab a pair of scissors. When we're going to be building the stained glass effect, I find that it's easier to get that effect when you're dealing with round shapes. So I'm just going to go in and get these main areas, but I'm going to get rid of any harsh angles on these pieces that is going to make it hard to overlap with. I'm going to keep this piece and I'm just going to get rid of the extra bit. So I cut off all of the harsh angles from these pieces, so now I'm only left with a pile of vinyl with rounded edges. One thing I also did was on some of the pieces I cut off the longer, more thin pieces, because the smaller, thinner pieces are not impossible to work with, but they are certainly more difficult. So I'm going to save them off to the side unless I run out of space and then I need to incorporate them. Alright, so we have our 3 colors all cut into their separate rounded pieces. Supplies that you're going to need is you're definitely going to have some form of heat resistant gloves. You're going to need a thicker board so that way you don't heat or burn the surface that you're working on, and you're going to need a heat gun. We're going to select some of our larger pieces and I'm just going to start fitting them together like it's a puzzle. Things don't have to line up perfectly, but try to make sure that there's no gaps where you're lining up your 2 pieces. I always try to follow the curves and try to imagine what's going to be like a nice organic shape. And I'm going to start with doing 2 pieces at once, and then I'm going to add on 1 more piece every single time to build up the surface. So making sure that my gloves are on, I'm going to grab my heat gun and I'm going to press down on one section and hold it in place while heating up the other side. And then once the vinyl starts to get that glassy look to it, where when it heats up, it just gets a little bit more reflective, I'm gonna press down there to make sure that it's setting flat. Just gonna hold it down and do the other side. Right, and we're gonna press it down, and if it doesn't stick completely, just keep reheating it on the seam line until the two vinyls stick together. And I'm going to grab my next piece, decide where it looks best. And once you find a spot where it fits in, again, same thing, hold it down on one side so it doesn't move while you're doing the heat gun. And you just do this because the heat gun does throw off some air as well as the heat. And if you do it without holding it down, then your piece might go flying off the board. Right, I'm just gonna heat up one area again. I'm gonna press both down at the same time. And then holding this end, and then heating the other. And you can see already how the vinyl is already getting a little bit shinier and a little bit more reflective just from heating it for a couple of seconds. Make sure that you're moving the heat gun around when you're melting the vinyl, because if you just hold the heat gun in one spot over the vinyl, eventually it has the potential to burn. You're going to take your pieces and follow along the curves of where you're going. So I lined this piece up with this piece, and then I melted it down because I thought that this curve of this piece lined up pretty well with this curve. While you're working with this vinyl, depending on what set you get, what colors you get, some of the vinyl is going to look different than others. For example, the yellow looks the same on both sides. Both sides have that same luster and shininess, but if you look on the orange pieces, it's pretty shiny on one side and then matte on the other. So when you're building your sheet, it's important to do shiny sides together, so that way when you're building your lantern, everything is shiny on the outside. But this is my red sheet so far. This is my pattern that I mapped out just using a pencil, but you can see that this is the total surface area of the lantern, the pieces that go on the inside. So if you melt out enough vinyl to cover this stencil, then you're going to have enough space to cut out your pieces from this area. Alright, that didn't take so long. So I have all of my sheets of my colors that I'm going to be using that came with the warm set. So for the next part of the tutorial, we're going to put our vinyl off to the side for a second and refocus back on the skeleton frame for the base of the lantern. In the time that it took us to melt down our vinyl, this should be dry from our coat of the sandable filler. And we're going to focus on sanding this down to make it smooth before we paint it one more time. Now that we have sanded this down to the point where it's smooth to the touch and we like how it looks, we are going to head back into our well-ventilated area so we can give it our final coat of paint. I'm using a metallic paint and I chose a darker color. Okay, so the next part that we're going to focus on is the planning out of our panels. So in your DIY package that you're going to receive, you'll have one sheet that shows the full scale. Each lantern is made up of 8 segments, and it's a repeating pattern of 1 and 2. So these 2 sections right here just repeat themselves again and again and again over the lantern. I'm just going to start mapping out however my sheet looks nice. I tend to be looking at where the curves line up with the shape underneath it. Like, if I'm looking at my sheet, I could be saying, ooh, like I like this curve right here. I like that overlap. And I think I want to highlight that in the center of the frame where this is going to end up. You can see how I did this on this lantern. I liked these curves as they were going in, so I mapped out where I wanted them to land next to each other as I went around the lantern. The process is kind of similar to that. In order to save space, I would recommend trying to find your shape somewhere closer to the edge of your sheet. I'm just going to grab my awl and a pair of scissors. Once I found my shape on my stencil, I'm going to just mark those lines underneath it with my awl. Once you have your shape marked onto your vinyl, you can go ahead and cut it out. Right, so then I have my shape. It's okay if your frame that you cut out does not perfectly line up with the tops of the shapes, because once it comes to a taper, you'll actually have some extra room here at the top where the pieces may overlap, and you are going to try to want to avoid getting in the way of your magnet, which is going to be pre-installed on the lanterns that you guys receive. So I think I'm going to want to do a lighter color underneath that, so I might grab the yellow. Alright, and there we go, we have 2 pieces. Alright, and continuing on with our pattern, we're just going to keep going, matching the shapes from the stencil into rounded and melted shapes in our pattern. Alright, so I have one panel done, and I think for my next one I'm going to want to go opposite with my colors, so that way I have a darker color, then a lighter color, then a lighter color, then darker color. So now that I have 2 full panels that are going onto our lantern, I'm going to quickly do the next 6. Alright, so once we're done cutting out all of our pieces, I have mine arranged in a setup of the first pattern and then the second pattern, and then I've repeated that for the full strip of 8 panels. Once you get to this stage, you can kind of mix and match, be like, oh, I don't like these 2 colors next to each other, I'm gonna swap them with another one. And remember that this panel is going to line up on the other side of the lantern as it rotates around in a circle. Alright, and we are back. We have our lantern painted. And the next step that we're going to do is we are going to put all of our frames into the skeleton. So I have my frames lined up as I want them, and I have my magnet pre-installed, and I have my lights set up on my base. Cass went over how to set the lights up in his part of the tutorial if you needed a demo on that. The first thing is I'm going to line up my sections here, so I'm going to start, if we call this an A and B pattern, so A, B, A, B, A, B, I'm going to start and line it up so that way my A is lined up with my A, my B is lined up with my B, etc. So that way I know that I'm doing the pattern the right way. Before I glue my piece into the frame, I'm just going to line it up with where it's going to go to make sure that it fits and it doesn't have any large segments overlapping into the other pieces of the frame. Basically, you want it to perfectly line up on the inside to have a little bit of space of the vinyl touching each of the frames, but not covering the frame completely, because you're going to want to use the bars of the skeleton to put a little bit of glue down. So you want to have enough space on the bars to fit the edge of 2 pieces of vinyl. So I like how this is fitting right now. I'm just gonna trim off the bottom of this frame a little bit, and then I'm gonna glue it into place. So I'm going to line that up again, and it looks like it fits pretty well. For the gluing part, you're going to want to use a little bit of hot glue. I mean the teeniest little amount of hot glue, like just a tiny bit on the edge, and then spread that down, and then that's good. And then quickly, before that tiny amount of hot glue dries, press it into your frame along the line where it is going, just like that. I'm just pressing it down. All right, and that's our first piece in. So I'm going to line up my second piece, and it has a little bit of vinyl coming out the side right here, so I'm just gonna trim that off. All right, so on this one, I did a tiny bit of glue on the top edge, a tiny bit of glue on the bottom edge, and I'm just pressing it with my fingers on the inside of the frame flat. It's so little glue that you don't even, if the glue touches your fingers, you don't really feel the heat. All right, so I'm gonna go in with my third piece, lining that up. Again, just double checking. I got a little bit of excess right there, so I'm just gonna trim the bottom. Alright, and that looks like it's fitting pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue that one in. Alright, pressing that in. Looking good so far. Alright, and I'll do the last one with you guys. So on the curve, you're gonna wanna put it in a little bit of a different way. I find that it's a lot easier to do this top section first and then curve it along the foot of the frame, and then once it's in place, you're going to do a little bit of glue on the corner and then roll it and press it at the end, and then lining that up with its edge of the frame and pressing it in. And once that has cooled, rolling this along the bottom of the frame, and then you're going to put a tiny bit of glue just right in the corner. Right, and I'm going to press that into the corner. There we go. That's the first one. You can see I actually did a little bit too much glue and it came out the sides. You can trim that off with an X-Acto knife once we're done. If you don't like this vinyl separating from the frame, you can do a tiny little bit of glue on all sides as you're gluing. I find that the glue on the top and the bottom gives pretty decent coverage without having to worry about the glue getting everywhere. Okay, I'm gonna fast forward through the next few frames as I do them, and I'll see you guys in a little bit. And just like that, everything is installed. We are so close to being done with our lantern. It's looking pretty good from the outside. On the inside, it is a little bit messy. So I have my lights right here, which I pre-installed, and the magnets connect like so. There we go. And the light switch is right here. Wow, look at that. That is so pretty with all of the different gradients of color and all of the different elements of the glassy texture of that melted vinyl. That's looking very, very nice. All right, so if you were looking at your lamp and you didn't like how some of the panels are similar colors, you didn't like how maybe you didn't like how light this yellow is compared to this yellow. They look the same when the light is on. And I have an extra panel right here. I have an orange one, and I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like if I put the orange one behind a yellow one. So same thing, but you can be a little bit less careful when you're doing the second layer of the vinyl, because you're basically just gluing it on top of the first piece. Right, and then I'm gonna see what it looks like when I turn the lamp on top of that, and then you have like a little bit of a different effect on that one panel. You have like a inside color and an outside color. So you can do that with any color combination you want. You can do like orange underneath red, yellow underneath orange, yellow underneath yellow. Just have fun with it, and you can make any number of crazy color combinations as you're going about building your lantern the way that you want to build it. But as of right now, I think we have our finished product. And there are the two stained glass lanterns and some of the color combinations. All right. And that has been the tutorial video for how to build your own stained glass lantern. The mushroom lantern's inspired by Tears of the Kingdom.
I hope this tutorial helped you guys, and thank you so much for watching.